So the common questions that I tend to get when all these things start to crash down, the first one was, where is a good time to buy? And I actually created this whole template thing and to share with you guys on how I technically answer them. So it's very easy to say to buy now when everything is dropping here and there, but it's a matter of how much money you have. If let's say you have plenty of money, then it's always a good time to buy. This whole value investing concept logic is all about having tons of money. So when market is on a correction basis, or we have this kind of crisis events, you just have to average down all the way, and towards a long run average, your price is actually very low. So that is provided you have a lot of money. But if you do not have a lot of money, then just wait for the virus to slow down. Wait for the virus to taper off a bit, and then you need to start to go in the market. You won't lose out on much. Your risk is much lower. Yes, you might buy off at a higher price, but for me, the risk is much lower than if you keep buying all the way down. Unless you have tons of money, billions sitting in the bank, you don't mind holding through this. So it's technically up to an individual basis. So the next question I have is, people always tend to ask, is it a good time to cut loss? They will have bought things when market is at its peak, and now it's drawdown, maybe like losing like 50-60%. So they're asking me whether it's a good time to cut loss. So a simple question is, whether do you think the virus will continue itself? That means, do you think COVID-19 will continue? If it's yes, then you might as well just end your suffering. Take the 60-70% loss and just call it a day, so you don't have to worry about your portfolio for a period of time. But most people will think that yes, virus will continue. Then when I tell them just end your suffering, then they will tell me that, oh no, I would rather just hold. So these are the kind of things. So, but if you think that the virus will not continue, let's say next week somehow the vaccine came out and all, so you may continue to hold your positions. Then people always ask me, so if I don't hold a position, is it a good time to buy now? I ask them to please refer to my FAQ 1. So these are two commonly people always ask regarding this COVID-19 situation. But I'll share my own personal view of this whole COVID-19 thing. So my take on the COVID-19 thing is that there's a lot of surprise interest rate cuts across many countries, and also normal interest rate cuts. Malaysia also has interest rate cuts. US actually had 2 surprise interest rate cuts. Their interest rate is actually now at 0% already. But what interest rate can actually do is that they actually wanted to stimulate this whole economy. They wanted to stimulate people borrowing loan at a 0% interest rate to sustain their business, this and that. And whenever this kind of situation arises, the normal reaction of the whole stock market index and the whole equity market will technically have to react upwards. That means it will technically have reverse back uptrend and this and that when there's interest rate cuts. But this time around, it didn't happen. So you can see that across the board, US or even Hong Kong Hang Seng Index, nothing actually went up. Maybe it went up for a day, like a technical rebound, but normally after it came back all the way down. So this whole interest rate thing, to me, technically, it's too much. I don't think any of the federal government can really do much through this interest rate, because the whole situation is not really like a financial crisis kind of situation. It was actually caused by a virus, and everyone had to go into lockdown. Demand for everything just technically dropped. So that's why the whole stock market actually just kept dropping down all the way. This COVID-19 thing, if you personally ask me, I don't think it will go away anytime soon. Why? Because the presence of super spreaders, that means I could be a super spreader, you could be a super spreader, anyone could be a super spreader, because this whole virus actually incubates inside the body for more than 14 days, and actually could be up to 20 old days. But if I passed it, let's say for example, during my 4th or 5th day, I passed it to someone else, and then that someone else who have kept it inside that his or her body for another 20 old days, then he will just pass it on, and the thing will just keep continuing on. So this whole super spreader thing is actually not really a super spreader, because everyone could be just a normal spreader. I could have COVID-19, I may not know after 20 over days. So yes, most countries are having this lockdown and isolation here and there. But to me, this isolation thing does not really work out too well, because every single country, they refuse to have very, very strict lockdown rules. China, on the other hand, they had a very, very strict where there are curfews. If you want to go buy your groceries, you can only do it like once a week or once in 2 weeks. And you can only do it provided there's like the specific time to do it, this and that, and only have you can only have like one family going and buy grocery at a single time, this and that. So whereas many other countries do not have this kind of thing. Many other countries are just that, oh, okay, we will ask every company to close down for maybe a month or 2 months, and basically everyone works from home. So where the difference lies is that people in many other countries, the government did not take into consideration those sleeping on the street. Whereas China, I believe they did. They set up temporary housing places, this and that, to combat this whole COVID-19, whereas many governments did not. US is the same, currently Malaysia is also the same. So many governments did not take into account those sleeping on the street. So the one sleeping on the street could be easily another COVID-19 positive person. He could be spreading around without him knowing, and the government couldn't do anything because most governments are not prepared for this. And people technically around globally are actually downplaying the effects of the virus. Why is it so? Because COVID-19 is actually the same family tree as the previous SARS many years ago. And SARS was only heavily affected in China and also Hong Kong, whereas other parts of the world were not badly affected. US was technically not even affected at all. So when this thing came around, people were thinking, oh, maybe it could be just another SARS. And SARS, there was no vaccine created to even combat SARS in the first place. So everyone was thinking, okay, when come to maybe around June, July, that was the same time when SARS actually just slowly disappeared. So people were thinking that, okay, maybe come June, July, then this whole COVID-19 thing will just slowly die off. So people did not really did not prepare for it. Governments did not prepare for it. So these are the things that I believe the COVID-19 situation will actually escalate because there are millions of people in US itself who are not tested for this COVID-19. So they'll be carrying around that thing for days, months, who knows, and spreading around. But what do I see after this COVID-19, let's say once it dies off? So one thing I will see that is that typical brick and mortar businesses may just die off and they will not sustain. And for those brick and mortar businesses that do sustain, there will be a massive change in how they operate their businesses. Probably they may turn from more human intensive work to maybe using machine to replace all these humans. Because who knows, maybe 5-10 years down the road, they will have to face another one situation like another maybe COVID-19 or maybe even worse than that. So I believe the brick and mortar businesses that do sustain and do survive this COVID-19 situation, they will definitely change to more IT stuff and machine and here and there. So the global industry trends itself will technically change to all this tech stuff. And on a very, very long run basis, when everything starts to change to machine, then many people will be laid out of jobs. That's for sure. Population will never drop across the world. So, but machines, when they start to take over, as population rise, there's no jobs at all. So everyone will be left with lesser jobs, technically. So everyone will be fighting around this and that. So once this COVID-19 thing is done, I do not see basically brick and mortar businesses is a good buy. If let's say there are some brick and mortar businesses that you think of buying, I don't think they will recover straight away. And what I see in the whole stock market index itself, I don't think it will go back to its recent all-time high and this and that. Like Dow Jones, it was 30,000 at 30,000. So I don't think, let's say if by Monday this COVID-19 situation is done, I don't think Dow Jones will fly all the way from 20,000 to 30,000 straight away. I think it will take maybe a year or two before it goes even reaches until 30,000. Why do I say so? Because like I said, brick and mortar businesses have to change and global industry trends will technically change here and there. There will be a sharp rebound, this and that, but I don't think in the very near term, it would actually go back to where it was, its recent all-time high of 30,000, this and that. And you need to take into account the side effects of all these extreme policy measures that each government globally they took. Like for example, like some governments actually, in order to sustain businesses from actually going into all this close down and all, they actually had, like for example, giving of money to those unemployed staff and something like this. So for some companies, I believe, let's say for example, if this thing were to continue all the way to the end of the year, imagine companies without production, without sales, they have to keep paying paid salary all the way to the end of the year. So these companies will definitely die off maybe towards the end of the year, this and that. So then all this unemployment paycheck would definitely start to rise and all. So governments, because of this situation, will have to, currently it's also the same, they are actually trying to combat this problem and hoping that business sustain all the way to this COVID-19 is done. But it will take a toll on the government's budget itself. Every government's budget will definitely be affected by this, how they handle the COVID-19 situation. And when the government's budget gets affected, technically their whole fiscal policy will not be as attractive even after COVID-19 is done. That's why they have to take a step back, then they have to basically plan everything, strategize everything, and they have to take maybe some more drastic measures to get back their money, or maybe increase tax and this and that. So all these extreme policy measures used to combat the current COVID-19 situation will definitely have to pay for it once COVID-19 is done. That's how I see the whole COVID-19 situation. This is actually the whole coronavirus COVID-19 cases globally. You can see China actually, if you checked last week until now, you can actually see from the line here, this is actually mainland China. It actually already stagnant around 80%, and 80K and all. Whereas every other country is actually spiking up. Every other locations is actually spiking up on a more exponential basis. Let's say, for example, within this week, like the weekends, and you have a sudden spike again, then I believe next week everything will just start crashing down again. It will be a repeat of everything. So where do I see this whole, what's happening to this whole COVID-19 and how it affects the market itself? So let's just pull it across. Sorry, let's just close this in case I click it. Okay, so you can see on a daily basis, actually Dow Jones today's close of the Dow Jones is actually one of the most critical close that I think globally everyone will be looking forward to, because Dow Jones, after it technically broke 20,000, it's been staying here for for days really. Actually, you can see that 20,000 is roughly around. You can see 20,000 is around this line. So it's been staying there for 3 days. So today itself is a Friday, and 20,000 is actually a very, very huge psychological kind of support. From the peak all the way down is almost 31% already, and 20,000 is technically a key support level. It's a psychological support level. If today Dow Jones fail to close close above 20,000, next week we might just see a repeat of a drop everywhere. But if let's say today's close is actually, they managed to close above 20,000, I believe next week, if there are no extreme spikes in COVID-19, market might technically take a rebound. And when there is a rebound, let's say for those people who ask me whether is it a good time to cut loss and all, then you can wait for next week. Next week to technically cut loss everything that you have, except bond. Because bond, I believe, once the whole rebound thing happened, I believe that it's just a temporary rebound. So when it starts to turn back all the way back down, I think bond will technically recover. That's why everything else, I think, let's say you're holding your gold and all, or maybe some of you are holding equities and you think of cutting loss, you can wait to see, because now most markets are closed except the US market, unless you're holding US equities. But let's say you're not holding US equities and it closes above 20,000, well, you have a chance to cut loss is still a cut loss, but cut lesser loss next week. So what do I see for in the next week? Provided there is no spike in COVID-19 cases and Dow Jones can close above 20,000. I see Australia dollars will rise back up, Euro dollars will rise back up, USD will fall, and gold will go back up. So where do I see the next resistance of this Dow Jones? It's actually at 23,000. So 23,000 is roughly around here. That's where I see the resistance, a short-term resistance in Dow Jones itself. You have to use Dow Jones chart in order to predict what will happen to all your other currencies and commodities that you're holding, or even equities. Like I mentioned, it's extremely important to know what's happening to all these stock market indices, because they are the one who technically affects your decision on what you want to do, your equities, your currencies, and all. So this is how I technically view the market for next week, provided there is no extreme spike in COVID-19 cases over the weekend. That's how I see it. As for gold, for a short-term basis, I believe gold, if let's say, you can see now it's also at one support already. So I believe that if let's say this whole Dow Jones can close above 20,000, no spike and all, I believe gold temporarily will go back up. But why did gold go all the way back down from its peak of around 1,700 and went down all the way to 1,400 plus? It's because people have to liquidate something to cover their margin call for something else. Most people buy equities on a margin basis. This is pretty common. So when equities start to drop, their portfolio is technically not 100% equities as well. Maybe it's like 20% gold. So they have to liquidate everything else to sustain all this margin call, or basically pay up for this margin call that they got hit at equity itself. That's why you can see gold, it dropped just as fast as the stock market dropped, the indices drop itself. So if let's say this whole stock market will be able to recover, then it will be a breather for gold as well. But I only see Dow Jones going up to around 23,000 and maybe not much more from that. Unless suddenly out of nowhere there's a vaccine discovered, then probably it might go back up more than 23,000. But it all is a possibility, because in the end we still need to watch for whether over the weekend there are more new cases, where there's a new spike, extreme spike in cases. So that's how I basically view the market for the following week. Are there any other questions? So we open up the Q&A. Imagine people, so China locked down for 2 months. That's what I say. Most people are unable to have that kind of patience, and most governments will not implement such drastic measures to lock down the whole country for that strictly, like how China did it. That's why I feel that this whole lockdown thing is not as efficient as what China did. So what China did is actually something that I believe the whole global has to learn from it. That's what I technically believe. Market was crashing quite a few days up when influenced by out those who short and the final margin would have. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was saying. You can see why gold dropped all the way as fast. It dropped as fast as the stock market dropped. The whole index dropped because, like I said, they have to liquidate every single thing in their portfolio just to pay up for this margin. So when most people will have gold as a diversification to what they have, but when margin calls keep getting hit, they have to liquidate something else. So they have to liquidate a gold position. That's why you can see it dropped just as fast as the stock market index dropped across globally. Not advisable to hold overnight position. Yes, I do not advise to hold any positions over the weekend technically, because you never know if, let's say, over the weekend, there's suddenly out of nowhere, there's a vaccine created. You may never know. Yes, correct. Now we are at the phase where vaccines are tested live on humans. It may take 1 or 2 months, but you may never know. Maybe the whole test was because of this COVID-19, the seriousness of this COVID-19, they will fast forward the whole test and all, and we've done it in a week. So nobody can basically time how fast this vaccine will be done. So it's best not to hold any positions overnight is still quite fine, but try not to hold anything past the weekend, because normally the cases tend to somehow spike through the weekend rather than through a weekday, because that's when people are technically more free to go and check. They have more time on their hand. So that's why try not to hold over the weekend. So all assets now, including safe haven, treasures, and gold, what cost selling? Yeah, so I was mentioning that the reason why gold dropped just as far, because people have to liquidate everything. They have to liquidate everything to sustain their um, margin calls, or maybe to pay up for the margin calls in equities dropping. That's why this gold and all dropped. Yeah, I do agree. Cheng Ai was saying that sometimes communist is much more better as long as the head do work and improve. Yep. So uh, it is quite true. Sometimes what a country really needs is maybe more communist kind of way of controlling. That means the government way of controlling is more to a more communism kind. So I do believe in times like this, yeah, you really, really need this kind of thing. So that's why this lockdown thing, unless the government can really, really strictly impose like how China did, this whole lockdown thing might not really, really work out to be. Someone lost in the market, someone gained, wonder where all this. Yeah, so there will be people who have lost in the market and someone else who have gained. So this whole market is actually more or less like a zero-sum game kind of thing. Someone has to lose, someone has to earn. Since China has kind of recovered from this, is it now a good time to look at China equity funds? Okay, so like I mentioned in my FAQ, so I wouldn't say it's a good time to look into China equity funds uh, per se lah. Yes, you can, if you have the money, actually, technically, you can actually look into some of China equity funds lah. You can technically do that, but my personal advice is best to wait everything to taper down first, because you never know. Who knows? Maybe there might be a second wave, because China technically has started back production of most of their stuff already. You can see like most manufacturing factories have started to operate in China. You may never know, maybe someone will become another super spreader or something like this in China itself. Yes, they control it very, very well, but things are really, really hard to say with all this COVID-19 thing. I think China is the manufacturer for global, but problem is now. Yep, that is also another key problem. So one thing that you need to take note of in other countries, basically besides China, is basically the food source. You can see that once this COVID-19 started to happen, gun sales in US itself actually spiked up. You have long lines, long queue at gun shops, people buying bullets actually. Because if one day, if let's say this COVID-19 were to last for 1 year or 2 years, food source will be a main problem. There might be riots, and people are actually prepared for it. I do not know what made them think like this, but yeah, food source may really be a problem. So, and governments are really, really technically not prepared for this. That's why, yeah, so you need to take into account quite a lot of things if you want to buy any single thing. Don't think virus can spread for good shipment. This I'm not too sure. I believe you can't actually spread the virus through good shipments. My bills. Yeah, exactly. That's why there were long queues for all this in guns shop for bullets and all. May I know the summary of the rest of the topic you cover? So yeah, there's actually not much more to cover. It's actually more to Q&A session for now. More to future demand weaknesses. Yep. So everything now it's waiting for this whole thing to recover, and once demand start to pick up, then you need to start to buy into all these equity funds and all. That'll be much safer. Okay, so if there are no other questions, that will be it for this webinar. Thank you all for spending your 1 hour with me here and listening to this webinar. And hopefully I'll see you in the next webinar soon.